as you know, I was originally a scientist, and the reason I was a scientist is because I like to play, but then I did sort of discover that that's not necessarily the way everybody does, not the way everybody does science, and so I think there was some aspect of feeling like, oh, if I'm not paying my dues, I can't be a scientist. Oh, I'm not paying my dues, I can't be a this or that. And I did get a lot of those kind of messages. And then a couple of years ago, I'm just like, I'm done. I'm done paying my dues. I'm just going to be myself and interact with the world as I interact with it. And that was really helpful for me because, at first I was like, okay, I am now a craniosacral therapist. And I'm like, well, I'm a craniosacral therapist who has all this weird background, which is probably a little bit different than most craniosacral therapists. How, if I'm really true to myself, and my business model is to be as much myself as possible and make a living out of it, how do I bring those other things into it? And so that is a certain degree to why I'm doing these interviews, is to actually have that part of myself be present in everything I do, because I can't ignore it. It really is there. I really do think these things, and they do influence the way that I do my work. So it's just kind of not much you can do about it at this point.
Have you ever treated any of your family members?
Yeah, no, I do, definitely. Obviously I never got a chance to treat Richard because he was dead. He died in 1988, which was actually the same year that I faced down a bunch of people from my was defending the trees and was arrested with like 42 other college students defending the trees on our property, and sort of went into this whole kind of environmentalist way of interacting with the world, which I did for about 5 or 10 years. And I still kind of have back there as well. But it was interesting because at the time I was having some difficulty with about my undergraduate thesis, and I was sort of running into problems where it was too ambitious and not focused enough, and running into just some other weird problems. And Richard was on his deathbed, and I went to visit him there, and I was telling him about how I was interacting with the world with this project I was doing. And he looked at my mother. He's like, "Yep, Joan, we're leaving the world in good hands." And I was just like, "Oh, cool! I'm one of the good hands." But then as time went on, and I tried one thing, I was, it's not necessarily going to work for me to be in graduate school, or it's not necessarily. But yet, getting all of the experience for what I do now. It's definitely not been a smooth road, but it's been an interesting road.
Well, it's interesting how you can tie that back to what we were talking about earlier about reality. It's like those little changes, like those small decisions, and finding the path. It might be bumpy or not, but
it's definitely mine.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never. I mean, that is one thing about my life, is I've never felt like I'm not doing what I need to be doing at any given moment, and I've often felt like it makes sense to me, but it doesn't necessarily make sense to everyone else. But now it's all making sense to me, as well as I think perhaps to other people. But I just realized I garbled that. But I think that I have been able to bring in some of these other parts of my life in a way that really, I think, benefits what I do now.